Dr. Marcus Way checked his equipment one last time as the twin suns of Draconos Prime began to set behind the canyon walls. The observation monitors blinked to life. Their sensors pointed toward the distant sky. Somewhere out there, the star-winged dragon packs were beginning their nightly hunt. Marcus had traveled halfway across the galaxy for this moment. 3 years of research proposals, 2 years of funding applications, and 6 months of travel, all to study the magnificent creatures that ruled these skies. He pulled his thermal blanket tighter around his shoulders. The desert nights here were cold, but his heated shelter would keep him comfortable while he recorded data from a safe distance. Safe distance. That was the key phrase in his research permit. Observe but do not interact. Study but do not interfere. The Galactic Wildlife Authority had been very clear about that. The first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Marcus activated his recording equipment and settled in to wait. Dragon packs usually returned from hunting just before dawn. He had all night to prepare. Hours passed slowly. Marcus made notes, drank coffee from his thermos, and watched the stars wheel overhead. The canyon was silent, except for the occasional whisper of wind through the rocks. Then he heard it. The sound that made his heart race with excitement. The deep, rhythmic whoosh of massive wings cutting through the air. Marcus grabbed his binoculars and scanned the sky. There, silhouetted against the smaller moon, he saw them. 7 dragons flying in formation, their scales gleaming like polished metal in the moonlight. They were magnificent. Each one was easily the size of an earth elephant, with wingspans that seemed to stretch forever. But something was wrong. The formation was broken. 2 dragons were struggling to stay airborne, their flight patterns erratic. As they came closer, Marcus could see dark stains on their scales. Blood. His hands tightened on the binoculars. The pack landed heavily in the canyon below his observation point, about 200 meters away. Close enough to see clearly through his equipment, far enough to be safe. Or so, he thought. Marcus watched through his night vision monitor as the dragons collapsed on the ground. 3 of them weren't moving at all. The others tried to help, but they were clearly injured too. What had happened to them? Then, he saw the answer. Wrapped around one dragon's leg was the unmistakable glint of a plasma net. Illegal hunting equipment. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest. Poachers. Here, in a protected reserve. He reached for his communication device to call the authorities, but stopped. By the time help arrived, it would be too late. He could already see the adult dragons growing weaker. Movement caught his eye. Small shapes emerged from beneath the wings of the fallen dragons. Hatchlings. 3 of them, no bigger than large dogs. They chirped and called to their parents, nudging them with their small snouts. But the adult dragons couldn't respond. Marcus watched in horror as, one by one, the adult dragons stopped breathing. The hatchlings' calls became more desperate. They huddled together, trembling in the cold night air. Then Marcus heard another sound, skittering clicks echoing off the canyon walls. His monitor showed shapes moving in the darkness. Scavengers. The local creatures could smell death, and they were hungry. The hatchlings bunched together, trying to look threatening. But they were too small, too young. The scavengers circled closer. Marcus's hands moved before his brain caught up. He grabbed the emergency flare gun from his safety kit and ran out of his shelter. His research protocols, his permits, his careful plans, all of it vanished from his mind. There were babies down there who needed help. He slid down the rocky slope, stumbling and scraping his hands. The scavengers turned toward him, their eyes reflecting his headlamp. Marcus fired the flare gun into the air. The bright red light exploded overhead, and the scavengers scattered, disappearing into the rocks. Marcus ran to the hatchlings. They hissed at him, their small teeth bared, but they were shaking with cold and fear. Dragon body temperature dropped quickly when they were young. Without their parents' warmth, They wouldn't survive the night. "It's okay," Marcus said softly, knowing they couldn't understand his words but hoping his tone would calm them. "I'm not going to hurt you." He slowly removed his jacket and spread it on the ground. Then he sat down and opened his arms. The hatchlings watched him with wide, frightened eyes. They had beautiful scales. One looked like copper, another like silver, and the smallest had scales that seemed to shift between gray and black. The smallest one moved first. It crept forward and pressed against Marcus's side. The warmth of his body was too tempting to resist. The other two followed quickly, climbing onto his lap and chest. They were heavier than they looked, but Marcus wrapped his arms around them carefully. The hatchlings burrowed against him, seeking every bit of warmth. Their scales were cold against his skin, but they gradually began to warm. Marcus pulled his jacket over all of them as best he could. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're safe now." The largest hatchling looked up at him with intelligent golden eyes. It made a small sound, almost like a purr. Then, it rested its head on his shoulder. Marcus knew he should call for help. He should report the dead dragons and the poachers. But his communication device was back in his shelter, and he couldn't move without disturbing the hatchlings. They needed his warmth more than he needed to follow protocol. So Marcus sat there in the cold canyon, surrounded by dead dragons and holding 3 orphaned babies. He started singing softly old earth lullabies his mother had sung to him. The hatchlings seemed to like the vibration of his voice. The night stretched on forever. Marcus's arms grew tired. His back ached, and the cold seeped into his bones. But he didn't move. The hatchlings needed him. As the first light of dawn touched the canyon rim, Marcus looked down. All 3 hatchlings were asleep on his chest, their breathing slow and steady. They looked peaceful now. Safe. Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. He had come here to observe dragons from a distance. Instead, he had become their protector. The sunrise painted the canyon in shades of orange and gold. Marcus blinked against the light, every muscle in his body screaming in protest. He had not moved for 6 hours. The 3 hatchlings were still curled on his chest, their scales now warm from his body heat and the morning sun. The smallest one yawned, showing rows of tiny sharp teeth. Its eyes opened slowly, focusing on Marcus's face. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then the hatchling made a soft chirping sound and snuggled closer against him. "Good morning to you too," Marcus whispered, his voice hoarse from the cold night air. The other 2 hatchlings stirred. The copper-scaled one stretched like a cat, its wings unfolding slightly. The silver one looked around at the canyon, then back at Marcus. It tilted its head, as if trying to understand what this strange creature was. Marcus knew he needed to call for help now. Slowly, carefully, he reached for his wrist communicator. The hatchlings watched his movements, but didn't seem afraid anymore. He pressed the emergency beacon and waited. The response came quickly. "This is Galactic Wildlife Authority Station 7. We received your distress signal. Dr. Wei, what is your situation?" Marcus looked down at the 3 pairs of eyes watching him. "I need immediate assistance. There are 7 dead starwing dragons in Canyon Valley 12. Evidence of illegal plasma net traps. And I have 3 orphaned hatchlings who need care." There was a pause on the other end. "Did you say you have the hatchlings with you? In physical contact?" "Yes. They were freezing. I had no choice." Another longer pause. "Dr. Wei, how long have you been in contact with the hatchlings?" Marcus checked his watch. "About 6 hours. Why does that matter?" "Please stay exactly where you are. We're sending a team immediately." The communication cut off. Marcus frowned. Something about the officer's tone worried him. While he waited, Marcus tried to keep the hatchlings comfortable. They seemed content to stay close to him, occasionally making small sounds. The copper one was bold, exploring a few meters away before hurrying back. The silver one watched everything carefully, its intelligent eyes missing nothing. The smallest one, with its shifting gray-black scales, stayed pressed against Marcus's side. Marcus found himself giving them names in his mind. Ember for the copper one, Ash for the silver, and Cinder for the smallest. "You three are going to need someone to take care of you," Marcus said softly. "I hope they find you a good place." Cinder looked up at him and made a sound that seemed almost sad. Marcus felt his heart squeeze. The GWA transport arrived within the hour. 3 officers in protective suits climbed out, carrying equipment. The lead officer, a tall Zentarii with blue skin, approached cautiously. "Dr. Wei, I'm Agent Corvix. I need you to remain calm and listen carefully." "I'm calm," Marcus said. "These hatchlings need proper care and—" "Dr. Wei, do you know anything about dragon imprinting?" Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Imprinting?" Corvix nodded slowly. "Dragon hatchlings imprint on the first warm-blooded creature that protects them in their first night outside the egg. Or in cases like this, in their first night alone. It's a survival instinct. They bond completely with that creature, seeing it as their parent." Marcus looked down at the 3 hatchlings. Ember had climbed onto his lap. Ash was pressed against his right side. Cinder hadn't left his left side all morning. "The imprinting window is approximately 12 hours, Corvix continued. "You've been with them for 6. In another 6 hours, the bond will be permanent." "But I'm human," Marcus said weakly. "I'm not their species. Surely they'll transfer their attachment to actual dragons?" Corvix's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Dragon imprinting doesn't work that way. Species doesn't matter to hatchlings. Only who protected them, who kept them warm, who sang to them through the night." Marcus's mind raced. "Then what happens now?" "We'll take them to a facility. They'll receive proper care from trained professionals. They'll be separated for optimal individual development. And—" "Separated?" Marcus interrupted. "They're siblings. They just lost their entire pack. You're going to separate them too?" "It's standard protocol for orphan dragons," Corvix said. "Each will go to a different research facility where they can be properly studied and—" "Studied?" Marcus felt anger rising. "They're babies, not experiments. Dragons are protected species, but they're not classified as sentient," Corvix explained. "Under galactic law, they're considered advanced wildlife. They have no legal rights to family units." Marcus looked at the 3 hatchlings. Ember was playing with his shoelace. Ash was watching the officers with suspicious eyes. Cinder was trembling slightly, sensing the tension. "What if I keep them?" The words came out before Marcus fully thought them through. Corvix blinked in surprise. "That's highly irregular. You're not trained in dragon care. You have no facilities. Your research permit doesn't cover." "I kept them alive last night," Marcus said firmly. "I can learn what they need. I have 6 months of supplies at my research station. That's enough time to get them stronger before they need to be independent." "Dr. Wei, you don't understand what you're proposing. Dragon hatchlings require constant attention, specialized diet, training to hunt, protection from predators. And as they grow, they become dangerous. Those teeth and claws are not toys." "I understand," Marcus said. He looked at Corvix directly. "But I also understand that splitting up a family is cruel. And I found evidence at the site. The poachers who killed this pack, they're from the Vorax Syndicate. I saw their markings on the equipment." Corvix's expression changed. "You're certain?" "Completely. Which means this wasn't random. They're targeting dragon packs specifically. These 3 hatchlings are the only witnesses to a major crime. Splitting them up and putting them in facilities makes them vulnerable." It wasn't entirely true, but Marcus hoped it would buy him time. Corvix considered this. Finally, he sighed. I'll need to verify your findings and report to headquarters. In the meantime, the imprinting window is already closing. If we try to separate you from the hatchlings now, it could cause them psychological harm. So I can keep them? Temporarily, Corvix emphasized. Until we assess the situation fully. But Dr. Wei, if you cannot provide adequate care, we will remove them. Understood? Understood. The officers left, taking samples and documenting the crime scene. Marcus sat with the 3 hatchlings, wondering what he had just agreed to. Ember chirped and climbed up to Marcus's shoulder. Ash settled in his lap. Cinder pressed closer to his side. Through his equipment translator designed to pick up animal vocalizations, Marcus heard something that made his breath catch. The device was interpreting the hatchling's sounds. Father. Warm. Safe. Father. Marcus closed his eyes. He had come to Draconos Prime to study dragons from a safe distance. Now, he was their parent. Okay, you 3, he said softly. Let's figure out how to do this together. The hatchlings chirped in response, and Marcus couldn't help but smile. His life had just become far more complicated than he ever imagined. 3 weeks had passed since that cold night in the canyon. Marcus's research station had transformed from a quiet observation post into a chaotic dragon nursery. Ember, Ash, and Cinder had grown significantly. They were now the size of large wolves, their wings stronger, and their appetites endless. Marcus had learned more about dragon parenting in 3 weeks than his entire academic career had prepared him for. The first lesson had been about food. Dragons were carnivores, and hatchlings needed to eat constantly to fuel their rapid growth. Marcus had overcome his initial discomfort with hunting, using small traps to catch the local rabbit-like creatures. The hatchlings had been clumsy at first, but Ember's boldness had led the way. Now all 3 could catch their own small prey, though they still preferred when Marcus helped. The second lesson had been about communication. The hatchlings understood him far better than he had expected. When he said, "Stay close," they stayed close. When he said danger, they became alert. They were learning his language, while he struggled to understand their chirps and growls. Marcus sat outside his shelter, watching Ember practice flying. The copper-scaled dragon launched herself into the air, wings beating furiously. She managed to stay airborne for nearly 30 seconds before landing in an ungraceful tumble. But she was getting better every day. Ash approached the exercise more carefully. The silver dragon studied Ember's attempts, then made his own try. His flight was more controlled, more calculated. He stayed up for 20 seconds before gliding down smoothly. Cinder, the smallest, still hesitated. She watched her siblings with anxious eyes, but didn't attempt to fly. Marcus understood. She was afraid of failing, afraid of being left behind. "Come here, little one," Marcus called softly. Cinder trotted over and pressed against his side. She always did this when she was nervous. Marcus stroked her shifting gray-black scales. "You'll fly when you're ready," he told her. No rush. But there was a rush. Whether Marcus wanted to admit it or not, in his research tablet was a message that had arrived that morning. Evidence of more poacher activity in the northern valleys. Another dragon pack was in danger. Marcus had reported his findings about the Vorax syndicate to Agent Corvix 3 weeks ago. The investigation was moving, but bureaucracy moved slowly. Forms needed to be filed. Permits needed approval. Evidence needed verification. Meanwhile, dragons were dying. Marcus looked at his 3 hatchlings. Ember was trying to fly again, her determination admirable. Ash was hunting a small lizard, his movements precise. Cinder was falling asleep against Marcus's leg, tired from the morning's activities. He had grown to love these 3 impossible creatures. They trusted him completely. They followed him everywhere. At night, they still curled up around him to sleep, even though they no longer needed his warmth. But Marcus knew something that made his chest tight with worry. He had been watching the canyon. Wild dragon packs flew overhead sometimes, always keeping their distance. They watched Marcus and his unusual family with what seemed like confusion. Dragons recognized other dragons, but they didn't seem to know what to make of a human raising hatchlings. Were the packs hostile? Curious? Marcus didn't know, and that uncertainty worried him. A beeping sound interrupted his thoughts. His long-range scanner had detected something. Marcus checked the screen and felt his blood run cold. In the northern valley, exactly where the next pack would be roosting for the day, there were heat signatures. Human heat signatures. At least 6 of them. Setting up equipment. The poachers were back. Marcus immediately contacted Corvix. Agent, I have visual confirmation of poachers in Northern Valley 3. They're setting up plasma nets right now. Trow. We're aware, Dr. Wei. Corvix's voice came through, frustrated. But we don't have authorization to move forces without proper jurisdiction approval. The paperwork is still being processed. The paperwork? Marcus felt anger surge through him. Dragons will die while you process paperwork? I understand your frustration, but I cannot act without proper authorization. It could take another 2 days. Marcus ended the call. 2 days. The pack would be attacked tonight. He looked at Ember, Ash, and Cinder. They were watching him, sensing his distress. Ash tilted his head, questioning. Ember made a concerned chirp. Even Cinder had woken up, alert. Marcus made a decision that would have horrified his academic advisors. He would go to that valley himself. He would warn the dragons somehow. It was foolish. It was dangerous. It violated every protocol. But it was right. Come on, you 3, Marcus said, packing his emergency kit. We're going for a walk. The journey took 3 hours across rocky terrain. The hatchlings stayed close, occasionally taking short flights to keep up with Marcus's vehicle. They seemed to understand this was important. As they approached Northern Valley, Marcus could see the dragon pack in the distance. They were magnificent 9 adult dragons resting on the warm rocks after their morning hunt. They hadn't noticed the danger yet. Marcus stopped his vehicle at a safe distance and stepped out. The hatchlings jumped down beside him. Now came the hard part. How did he warn dragons that couldn't understand human speech? He started walking toward the pack, waving his arms. The adult dragons noticed immediately. Their heads rose, eyes focusing on the strange human approaching. With 3 hatchlings, the reaction was immediate and frightening. The adults stood up, wings spreading in a threatening display. Low growls echoed across the valley. They saw Marcus as a threat to the hatchlings, not understanding that he was trying to help. No. No, Marcus said desperately. I'm not the danger. The poachers are the danger. The nets are. The largest dragon took a step forward, its teeth bared. The others moved into protective positions around their own young. Marcus backed up slowly, his heart pounding. This wasn't working. They were going to attack him, and then the poachers would get them anyway. Then Cinder did something unexpected. The smallest hatchling ran forward, past Marcus, toward the adult dragons. She stopped halfway between Marcus and the pack. Then she began to call out, her voice high and urgent. Ember and Ash immediately joined her. All 3 hatchlings were making sounds Marcus had never heard before. It wasn't the chirps and purrs they used with him. This was dragon speech. They were talking to the wild pack. The adult dragons stopped their threatening advance, their heads tilted, listening. One of them, with scales like burnished gold, responded with sounds of his own. The hatchlings called back, their voices rising. They kept looking at Marcus, then at the valley where the nets were hidden, then back at the adults. Marcus realized what they were doing. They were translating. His hatchlings were warning the wild pack in words the adults could understand. The golden dragon, clearly the pack leader, stared at Marcus for a long moment. Then he looked at Ember, Ash, and Cinder. His expression was unreadable. Marcus held his breath. Everything depended on whether this leader would trust the warning of 3 hatchlings raised by a human. The golden dragon raised his head and roared. It was a sound that shook the valley. The other adults responded immediately, taking flight. They were leaving, moving to a different location. Marcus felt relief flood through him. They understood. They were safe. But his relief was short-lived. From the valley came shouts of alarm. The poachers had heard the roar. They were activating their nets early, trying to catch any dragon they could. Several nets fired into the air. 2 adult dragons, slower than the others, were caught. They fell, tangled in the plasma webbing. Marcus didn't think. He ran toward them, his wire cutters in hand. Behind him, 3 small dragons took flight for the first time together, following their father into danger. Marcus ran across the rocky ground, his boots slipping on loose stones. The 2 trapped dragons thrashed in the plasma nets, their roars of pain and rage echoing through the valley. The nets burned wherever they touched scales, designed to weaken and capture without killing. "Get that human!" one of the poachers shouted. Marcus saw 6 figures in protective gear running toward him, weapons drawn. Above, the rest of the dragon pack circled, calling out to their trapped companions. But they didn't attack. Dragons were intelligent enough to recognize weapons they couldn't fight. The plasma nets had been designed specifically to counter dragon fire and claws. Marcus reached the first trapped dragon, a deep blue female. Her eyes met his, filled with pain and fury. She snapped at him with her teeth, not understanding he was trying to help. "I'm sorry," Marcus gasped, pulling out his wire cutters. "This is going to hurt more before it gets better." He began cutting through the net. Each strand released a small shock when severed, making his hands go numb. The dragon roared as the plasma energy dispersed, but Marcus kept cutting. 1 strand, then another. A weapon fired. The plasma bolt hit the ground near Marcus's feet, scorching the earth. The poachers were getting closer. Then 3 small shapes dove from the sky. Ember hit the first poacher like a copper missile, knocking him down. She was still small, still young, but she had sharp teeth and sharper claws. The poacher yelled in surprise and pain. Ash went for the weapons, using his precise movements to snap the plasma rifles with his jaws. The equipment sparked and died in his mouth. Cinder, the smallest and most afraid, surprised everyone. She flew straight at the poachers' faces, breathing small puffs of flame. It wasn't the massive fire of an adult dragon, but it was enough to make the humans stumble backward, beating at their smoking clothes. "Fall back," the lead poacher shouted. "There are too many dragons." 3 hatchlings. The poachers were retreating from 3 baby dragons. Marcus would have laughed if he wasn't so focused on cutting the net. Finally, the last strand broke. The blue dragon pulled free, her scales burned but her spirit intact. She looked at Marcus with new understanding in her eyes. The second trapped dragon was the golden leader, who had listened to the hatchling's warning. He was larger, and the net had wrapped around him more tightly. Marcus ran to him, his hands still numb from the shocks. "I've got you," Marcus said, beginning to cut. The golden dragon held perfectly still, understanding what Marcus was doing. His intelligent amber eyes watched the human work, watched the 3 hatchlings chase away the poachers, watched everything. More plasma bolts fired through the air. One grazed Marcus's shoulder, and he cried out in pain. The burn was intense, searing through his jacket and into his skin. His vision blurred for a moment. The golden dragon roared. It wasn't a roar of pain or fear. It was a roar of command. The circling pack responded immediately. They dove as one unit. Not at the poachers directly, but creating a wall of wings and scales between the humans and Marcus. They had seen enough. A human was saving their leader. The young ones had warned them of danger. This was not an enemy. Protected by the wall of dragons, Marcus finished cutting the last strands. The golden leader pulled free and stood, shaking off the remains of the net. He was magnificent, easily 3 times the size of any dragon Marcus had seen before. The leader turned to face Marcus. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Marcus clutched his burned shoulder, swaying slightly from pain and shock. The 3 hatchlings rushed to his side, chirping frantically. Then the golden dragon did something that Marcus would never forget. He lowered his massive head and gently touched his snout to Marcus's forehead. It was a gesture of respect, of gratitude, of acknowledgement. The other dragons landed around them, forming a protective circle. The blue female Marcus had freed first came to his other side, supporting him with her shoulder as his legs started to give out. "Father hurt," Cinder whimpered, pressing against his leg. "We protect Father," Ember growled, her young voice fierce. "Father saved Pack," Ash added, looking at the adult dragons. The golden leader raised his head and made a series of sounds. The adult dragons responded, their voices creating a harmony that seemed to fill the valley. Marcus's translator couldn't capture all the meanings, but he caught fragments. Debt, honor, family protection. The poachers were gone, their vehicles racing away into the distance. They had lost their equipment and their nerve. The Vorax Syndicate would not be happy, but Marcus couldn't care about that right now. His shoulder felt like fire. His vision was getting darker around the edges. He had pushed himself too hard, and the plasma burn was worse than he thought. I need to sit down," Marcus mumbled. The dragons moved as one, creating a nest of wings and warm bodies. They lowered Marcus gently to the ground, surrounding him completely. The 3 hatchlings climbed onto his chest, just as they had that first night. But this time they weren't seeking warmth. They were giving it. The adult dragons pressed close, sharing their body heat. The blue female he had saved placed her wing over him like a blanket. The golden leader lay down beside him, his large body radiating warmth. Marcus wanted to stay awake. He wanted to call for help. He wanted to tell the dragons they didn't need to do this. But his body had other plans. The pain faded as shock and exhaustion took over. The last thing Marcus heard before darkness claimed him was a sound he had never expected. The golden leader was making low, rumbling sounds, rhythmic sounds, like a lullaby. The dragons were singing to him, just as he had sung to 3 orphaned hatchlings on a cold night weeks ago. Marcus smiled as his eyes closed. He had saved the pack. His hatchlings were safe. And for the first time, he understood something profound. Family wasn't about species or biology. Family was about who stood beside you when danger came, who protected you when you were vulnerable, who sang you to sleep when you were hurt. As consciousness faded, Marcus felt the 3 hatchlings snuggle closer on his chest, their warmth mixing with the warmth of the adult dragons surrounding them all. He was safe. They were all safe. And somehow, impossibly, a human had become part of a dragon pack. The night came slowly to the valley, but this time, no one hunted. The pack stayed together, keeping watch over the strange human who had earned their trust. The 3 hatchlings refused to move from their father's chest, just as they had on that first night. By morning, everything would change. But tonight, they were simply a family, keeping each other warm. The dragon pack hunted all night. By morning, the hatchlings were asleep on his chest. Part 5. A New Pack. Marcus woke to warmth and the sound of breathing. For a moment, he thought he was back in his shelter after that first night. But when he opened his eyes, he saw the curved walls of a dragon nesting cave, not his research station. He was lying on soft moss and dried grass. Ember, ash, and cinder were curled against him, just as they always were. But surrounding them were adult dragons, sleeping in a protective circle. The golden leader was closest, one amber eye opening as Marcus stirred. "How did I get here?" Marcus whispered, his throat dry. The leader made a low, rumbling sound. Marcus's translator device, still clipped to his belt, flickered to life. Carried. Safe. Healed. Marcus looked at his shoulder. Someone had wrapped it in broad leaves held in place by what looked like spider silk. The burn still hurt, but the pain was manageable. Dragons had their own medicine, their own ways of healing. "Thank you," Marcus said, softly. A sound echoed from outside the cave. Vehicles. Marcus tensed, but the dragons didn't seem alarmed. The golden leader stood and walked toward the cave entrance, gesturing for Marcus to follow. Marcus carefully moved the sleeping hatchlings and stood on shaky legs. Cinder woke immediately, chirping in concern. "Stay here, little one," Marcus said gently. "I'll be right back." Outside, the morning sun was bright. Marcus squinted and saw GWA, transports, landing in the valley below. Agent Corvix emerged, along with several other officers and someone Marcus didn't recognize, a tall woman in official robes bearing the seal of the Galactic Council. Corvix climbed up to the cave entrance, his expression unreadable. "Dr. Wei, you've caused quite a commotion." "I saved lives," Marcus said simply. "You violated your research permit. You interfered with wildlife. You engaged poachers without authorization. And..." Corvix paused, glancing at the golden dragon standing beside Marcus. "You've apparently been adopted by a dragon pack." The woman in robes stepped forward. "I am Council Representative Thera. I've come because of some very unusual reports. Agent Corvix tells me that you've been raising 3 dragon hatchlings. Is this correct?" "Yes," Marcus said. "And these hatchlings warned a wild pack of danger?" "Yes." "And you risked your life to save dragons that weren't the ones you'd been caring for?" "Yes." Representative Thara studied Marcus for a long moment. Then she looked at the golden dragon. "And this is Elder Talon, leader of the Northern Valley Pack?" The golden dragon Elder Talon stepped forward. He opened his mouth, and to Marcus's shock, words came out. Not dragon speech, but actual human words, spoken in a deep, resonant voice. "Yes, I am Talon." Marcus stumbled backward. "You can speak?" Corvix looked equally shocked. Representative Thara, however, simply nodded, as if she had expected this. Talon's amber eyes held wisdom and something like amusement. "All dragons can speak your tongue. We simply choose not to. Why speak to those who see us as animals? As things to be studied and controlled?" "But Marcus started. "You are different," Talon interrupted. "You saved 3 hatchlings who were not your species. You sang to them. You learned their needs. You protected them when you could have abandoned them. And then you risked everything to save dragons you did not know." Talon's head lowered until he was eye level with Marcus. "You treated us as equals. As people. Not as wildlife." Representative Thara pulled out a recording device. "Elder Talon, you understand that by speaking now, you're requesting that dragons be reclassified as sentient beings under galactic law? I am demanding it," Talon said firmly. "We have watched for centuries as species after species were studied, cataloged, and controlled by those who never thought to simply ask us what we wanted. We chose silence because we saw no benefit to conversation. But this human," Talon gestured to Marcus with his wing, "he has shown us that some beings in this galaxy still understand honor, still understand family." From the cave came 3 chirps. Ember, ash, and cinder emerged, running to Marcus's side. They looked at Elder Talon with a mixture of respect and curiosity. These three, Talon continued, were taken from us by violence. They should have died, but Marcus Way kept them alive. He became their father, not because he had to, but because it was right. And when they needed to warn my pack, they found their voices because he had taught them that communication mattered. That family mattered. Representative Thara recorded everything. This changes everything. If dragons are sentient, then all current wildlife protocols are void. Dragon territories become sovereign lands. Dragon young have legal protection as children, not animals. Yes, Talon said. That is what we demand. And we demand that Marcus Way and his 3 hatchlings be recognized as a family unit. They will not be separated. He is their father by choice and by bond. Any attempt to remove them from him will be met by the united force of every dragon pack on this world. Corvix looked at Marcus with a mixture of respect and exasperation. You've just started a political revolution, Dr. Way. Marcus looked down at Ember, Ash, and Cinder. They gazed up at him with complete trust and love. I just wanted to keep them safe. You did more than that, Representative Thara said. You've proven that sentience isn't always obvious, that we must listen, not just observe. The Galactic Council will need to review every protected species now. How many others have we been calling animals when they were people all along? The process took weeks. Representatives came from across the galaxy. Dragon packs gathered to speak for the first time in recorded history. Scientists debated. Politicians argued. But in the end, the decision was clear. Dragons were declared sentient. Their world became their own. And Marcus Way received official custodial rights for 3 dragon children named Ember, Ash, and Cinder. 6 months later, Marcus stood outside his expanded research station, now officially called a home. The structure had been modified with dragon-sized spaces and reinforced walls. Ember, Ash, and Cinder were adolescents now, each nearly the size of an adult horse. They still hunted with the wild packs, learning their heritage and culture. But every night, they came home. Marcus watched the sunset, a cup of tea in his hand. Ember landed first, her copper scales gleaming. She had become the pack's scout, brave and curious. Ash followed, carrying a fresh catch to share. He had become their strategist, careful and thoughtful. Cinder came last, landing gently beside Marcus. She was still the smallest, but she had found her voice and often translated between humans and dragons now. Father, Cinder said in her careful human speech. She had been the first to learn. Elder Talon comes to visit tomorrow. He wants to learn more about Earth literature. Marcus smiled. Tell him I'll have books ready. Ember nudged him with her snout. Hungry. Always together, Marcus confirmed. As the stars appeared, more dragons arrived. Young ones from other packs, curious about the human who had changed everything. They landed at a respectful distance, watching. Elder Talon landed among them, his golden scales like captured sunlight. Your family grows, Marcus Way. Marcus looked at the gathering dragons, then at his 3 children. I came here to study dragons from far away. I never imagined I'd become part of their world. You became part of our world the moment you chose compassion over protocol, Talon said. That is the gift of your species. Humans can see beyond difference. You can love what is not like you. That is rare in this galaxy. Cinder pressed against Marcus's side, just as she had on that first cold night. Ember and Ash settled beside him. More young dragons crept closer, their eyes curious and hopeful. Looks like I'm going to need a bigger home, Marcus said with a laugh. We will help build, Talon offered. That is what packs do. We care for our own. Marcus watched the stars wheel overhead, surrounded by dragons who trusted him. 3 orphaned hatchlings had become his children. One desperate night of compassion had become a lifetime of family. One human's choice to protect, instead of observe, had changed the understanding of an entire species. As the night deepened, the dragons began to settle for sleep. Ember, Ash, and Cinder arranged themselves around Marcus, just as they always did. The visiting young dragons curled up nearby, seeking the same warmth and safety. Marcus stroked Cinder's scales, feeling her breathing slow into sleep. He thought about that first night, when 3 terrified hatchlings had needed someone to keep them warm. He had never imagined it would lead here to a new family, a new understanding, and a new chapter for both humans and dragons. "Good night, my children," Marcus whispered. 3 sleepy voices answered in unison. "Good night, Father." Above them, the stars shone down on a world where a human had become part of a dragon pack, and where family had proven to be stronger than any difference between species. And in the morning, they would wake together to face whatever came next, as all families do, united by love rather than biology, by choice rather than chance.